quick intro. All right, on today's show, we've got a special treat. I'm here with Gene Ruth, and Gene is a longtime employee. I think that was the only job you had, working at Stewart Warner. We know Stewart Warner in the racing world as a gauge company, but Stewart Warner has done quite a few other things in the manufacturing of anything from televisions to radios to other things. But Gene, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Gene, you worked for Stewart Warner for quite a few years. Tell us a little bit about your history with Stewart Warner.
Well, I worked there 44 years. Would have worked there longer, but the company closed down.
Okay.
When they were bought out by BTR, which was British Tire and Rubber. I started working in the customer service department and worked my way up to when I was manager of the customer service department, and then entailed quite a few departments. And my final job was not director, but manager again, general manager of the customer service departments. We had a unique situation at our company because we made so many different items for so many different customers. We had to be careful so we can deliver and meet their schedules. So we had kind of like a custom-made departments for all that. Not using the word I, but in this case here, our department controlled really the factory, which is unusual. You have a production control department, you've got a manufacturing department. We actually scheduled and told them what to build and what to make.
Okay, and this was all in one building, as I've learned.
Big building.
Big building in the city of Chicago.
1,325,000 cubic feet.
Oh wow!
It was big. It was big. It was 2.5 blocks long and a block wide. And
oh
like
wow!
I say, anywhere from 7 floors up to 13.
And at the peak of it, how many employees actually worked?
7,600.
7,600 employees.
But the majority, when I started there, we had about 5,000.
Okay.
And that was a standard amount.
Now, standing right behind you, we're looking at something that is believed to be one of the original items that Stewart Warner made.
It wasn't Stewart Warner in those days, it was Stewart and Clark.
Okay.
And this was manufactured in 1898. And that is a shear machine. And it would take the fleece off whatever animal they had.
Okay.
Gamblers, they fleeced them enough times, but a little joke though.
Right. So Stewart Warner, in the racing world, we knew them as a gauge company, but what was it really?
Okay, Stewart Warner started out actually with E.W. Bassick, which was an Eastern company. And there was a lot of merging. A lot of people bought different things. And they would make casters. They would make all types of furniture hardware. And they continued that all the way up until in the 50s. Stewart and Clark, in 1898, was making all this different types of shears for horses, mainly, but they did for sheep too. And they put a plant at on Diversey, 1826 Diversey, which was the original, and which is our corporate headquarters, and is where they built a 13-story building. They were in that fairly heavy, and I met a lot of the people that worked for back in those days, and and what had happened was it was kind of fortunate that the industry changed at the same time they started to change. A fellow named John K. Stewart, who was one of the starters of the company, he was a sharp cookie. He had over 100 patents. And he came in and he said, I think we're going to switch from horse shearing and so on and go in the automotive business because it's doubling every year. And it did.
Okay.
So they did. 1906, they started building instruments. And then, fortunately, now we get to Stewart Warner. It was Stewart and Clark, and there was an outfit called A.P. Warner in Beloit, Wisconsin, who also made speedometers and gauges. And actually, they were better than the Stewart Warner, or
okay.
Stewart. So they bought, but Stewart had the money, and they bought them out. and they merged, and in 1912, Stewart Warner opened up.
Okay.
And from then on, it was gangbusters. Every year, they doubled the production, doubled their sales.
Okay, because of the automobile and
Yeah,
the
automotive was going. I mean, if you go back, look back in 1912, you'd be shocked at how many cars they made. Weren't that many.
right.
And all of a sudden, within 10 years, there was 100,000. There was 1,000,000. It just went on and on and on.
Right.
And Stewart Warner did very well. They made a good instrument, and they developed into there from gauges, fuel pumps, backup lights. I mean, different, all automotives. Unbelievable.
Okay, so they were in today's comparison to a tier one manufacturer supplying automotive manufacturing to whatever it was. So
We're a quality house. Okay, now here's one of the early instruments, and you'll notice on the face dial it says Stewart. At that time, it was Stewart Instrument Company. It wasn't nothing to do with Warner. This was built in 1914, and this was one of the early speedometers. And like I said, we were in competition with Warner Instrument, who we later merged with in 1912.
and you have some other stuff there. Why don't you show us some of the other things that are there?
Earlier, then we made the klaxon horns. Maybe I'll see if I can. They sounded originally a lot better than that. But these were a powerhouse item to be in your car driving down the street and be a dog or a horse. This is more sophisticated. Later on, we made police speedometers. This was for Harley Davidson. And they're accurate right in the button, plus and minus 0. And that's the odometer reading, and change it. This instrument was made in 1931. It was made in Egypt. And you can see that it's got Arabic on it. Kind of an interesting item. In the cabin over here, this is later years, but this was a headache for us. This was built 1950. Do I remember that? I was at Stewart Warner then. And this was what they call a Cyclops. And it came in, I think, 6 different colors. The housing and the bezel itself. And for us to try to match these items to build production, because Studebaker was well known to have, they want everything in a hurry. It didn't give me much time. And we'd have all these Delron housings painted, and I'd had to switch over. So wait a minute, they want azure blue. What happened to mocha brown? That was heavy. That's out.
Okay, so
And so we had a lot of fun. At the same time we did this, we also made it for Hudson Motor Car. They had the same standards, different bezel, different, and all color. And so we really, paint shop went crazy trying to get those things rolling.
now in this museum here that you've put together, you've got quite a few of the pieces that Stewart Warner made as far as gauges. Were they into tractors and gauges for farm implements and that sort of stuff and
We
everything?
make gauges for everything.
Okay.
Airplanes,
Okay.
like I said, farm equipment, truck business, awful lot of trucks. And all of this came from our factory. Here's an interesting one. You see what says Elgin back there?
Yeah.
That's from Elgin Sweeper.
Oh,
It's
okay.
still in business these days. There's one day.
Yes, I see. Yeah, street sweepers.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah. This is very rare. This was built in 1938, and they honored the Diane quintuplets, who were born in Canada.
Okay.
And at that time, you know, when you had the quintuplets, that was a lot. There was
Oh,
no
yeah.
such thing. And was a very expensive item, and all it really was a standard radio, and they just put decals on there.
Okay.
These are all original, and this plays, but I don't want to plug it in.
So, Gene, along with the gauges and everything, I see you've got a nice collection of the radios and some TVs here. Tell us about the radio and TV business that Stewart Warner did.
Well, this started in about 1922, 23. It was known as Division 5. The instrument division was Division 1.
Okay.
And we started this, and they did a tremendous job of advertising. They made a good radio.
And do any of these work?
This little cookie does.
Oh, it sure is. Bottom below. Yeah. Yeah.
Now remember, this is tubes. We're gonna have to take time to.
Okay, so I seen the light come on, but I'm not hearing any sound yet. So,
There you are.
As a quarterback, you're the internal clock, and the thing gets haywire whenever you're getting pressure, and the ball office collapsing.
Hey, you know, and if it still tunes in the Bears post game, I guess then it's a darn nice piece.
They had the back end, if you notice.
Okay, there's why. It's all tubes in there.
Yeah, it's all tubes.
Oh, yeah. And now, wow, that's quite the speaker down there also.
Oh, yeah. Big 12-inch woofer.
Yeah. Wow. What brought Stewart Warner into the radio business?
The management, they felt they want to go into everything.
Okay.
They built more darn things they wouldn't shake a stick at. I mean, they just kept building and thinking what would sell. They made refrigerators,
Okay.
bumpers for cars, stoves, Stewart. There was an awful lot of items we made.
Okay. And you've got some TVs here. Let's take a look at the TVs. I see we've got a nice big unit here, but an awful small screen.
Yeah, well, this was the biggest unit we made.
Okay.
But you don't forget, in those days, and I'm sort of turning my back on you, but they didn't have big pictures.
Tell us about that TV.
Well, this was given to us by a former student on our football team in grammar school, Craig Brookhauser,
Okay.
whose uncle, Pete Groth, worked at Stewart Warner. His uncles were also good baseball players.
Okay.
And Craig had this when it was actually working. And he said, I'd like to donate it to the museum, but I'd like to get it back. And if you'll notice in the back here, Craig Brookhauser, you will get this back, and if you believe there's something written here, I'm pulling your leg. One thing I liked about Stewart Warner, and that's why we still do it, our communication was terrific. They had their own newspaper, and they used it constantly.
Okay.
One of the things, and I'll get into celebrities, one of our famous Hall of Famers was a fellow named Sidney Sheldon. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he wrote over 100 books.
Yes, Sidney Sheldon.
Well known
Yep.
in TV.
Yep.
I Dream a Dreamy, or whatever.
I Dream of Jeannie. Yeah.
That was
Yep.
his. But he had all kinds. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, I think 25, 30 shows that he did. He was terrific. And he started at Stewart Warner in 1934. And one of his jobs, he was a newspaper person.
Okay.
And what that would be is Fanny Rinkenpfeffer was on vacation. She visited her family up in the upper Adirondack and spent 2 weeks up there refreshing herself. Things like that.
Okay. So, you know, along with all these other things, now Stewart Warner made the gauges. When I was younger, you had to have the 2 5/8 inch, you know, oil pressure gauge and the water temperature gauge in your car, or else you just didn't have a hot rod.
Yeah, that was the standard size.
Okay. All right. So tell us a little bit about the racing history of Stewart Warner gauges.
A lot of the race drivers would come to us and would ask questions about what about this, what kind of speedometer should we use, and so on and so forth. And of course, Stewart Warner always tried to benefit by that by giving him our stuff. And they were good speedometers.
Okay.
They really were. They were the best made.
And I seen a plaque over here for the Indy 500. Tell us about that.
We sponsored the winner at that 250 mile. We would get.
Okay, so whoever was ahead won that
right.
won that plaque and was the winner of the Stewart. Was there prize money along with that?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So that was the start of like a contingency program.
Well, we did that for years.
For manufacturers to.
Stewart Warner did a lot of those kind of things.
Okay.
They were very good to the drivers and very good to the people.
So as a tier 1 supplier to the manufacturers in those days, they weren't called that, I'm sure, but they were an integral part in the history of America and what went on here in Chicago.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, Gene, it's been a pleasure meeting you. Thanks for sharing your museum with us. And hey, it's the city of Chicago, and we've got somebody that's been a part of it for all of your life.
Did they give you a ticket you had to pay for, or when you walked in?
No tickets, but I think we're going to make a donation anyway.
No, we don't.
Thanks, Gene.